Hello and welcome to another Good Vibes Gaming discussion. I'm your host, Steve Bowling. Today I'm joined by Ash Paulson, Derek Bittner, and Daniel Alba. And we're going to be talking about a game that I think we're all pretty excited for, being Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now, I do have to mention, before we get into the discussion, that this video is sponsored by Square Enix, who approached us to do this piece of content on Rebirth, which I think was a pretty easy yes for us, right, fellas?
Oh, yeah.
That's
Twist
probably
my arm,
the
why don't
easiest
you?
yes of our lives. Yeah, right? Pretty easy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've been pretty vocal about our excitement for this game. So, thanks to Square Enix for sponsoring this video. We're going to be talking about OG Final Fantasy VII Remake, and then our thoughts on Rebirth, especially after having finished the demo that just came out. I was really excited that they finally dropped a demo for this game. Derek, you streamed it on the channel, and I'm pretty sure you came away pretty excited.
Oh, I was just giddy the entire time. I just had to stupid grin the entire thing because it's just like, yes, it's more of what I loved in Remake, and I'm here for it. I've specifically stayed away from a lot of the trailers just because I want to try to go in as fresh as possible. So getting that dopamine hit of the demo was just, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say, we haven't, this will be the first time we've publicly discussed our experiences with the demo, and I want to get to those in a little bit. Also, just to stay clear of our sponsored post, we do have a link down in the description where if you want to pick up Rebirth, you can use our link. It helps support the channel. But otherwise, let's jump into the meat of the discussion. Now, before we do that, I want to get everybody's history with Final Fantasy VII. Obviously, I've played the original remake and the Rebirth demo. I believe that's pretty much the same across the panel. Am I right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Daniel, you're the youngest of us. Did you play OG FF7?
I never had a PlayStation 1, so I didn't play Final Fantasy VII until a friend recommended it to me when I had my PS2. So I actually played the original on my PS2 instead of the original PS1. And that is something I'll never forget. I was talking to him through it all the way through. We were talking about like, oh, this just happened. I'm here now, and I just love Midgar and all that, all the events, all the beats hitting the story, and he had a great time hearing my reactions. It's just such a unique game back then. I wasn't fully into the whole like RPG genre at the time, but as I kept going, I was like, this is a genre I really love to see more and more of, and I love the characters, the story. Just easily fell in love with Final Fantasy that way, because that actually was my first Final Fantasy. I never played anyone before then, and that's how that was my entry point. Yeah,
that's a great entry point. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, seriously.
I mean, I have to agree, because not only was Final Fantasy VII my first Final Fantasy, it was my first RPG in general. Very similar to Daniel.
Wow.
I did play it on original hardware at the time, but I was seeing all the trailers coming out at the time and just like, what is this game? And I just happened to have a friend visiting for the summer after the game came out from California, had brought all this stuff along because he was there for like 2 weeks visiting family as well. And he brought Final Fantasy VII along, and he's like, try this out. And I played it and I loved it. It just immediately clicked with me. It's like, oh, games can be like this? This is incredible. And bless his heart, he decided to let me have that game, keep the game,
Wow.
until he visited again. So he went back to California, and I had it the entire summer just playing it. So, yeah.
That's a nice friend, man.
Yeah, he really just wanted me to get into it, and it worked, because I've been a diehard Final Fantasy fan ever since.
That is
Awesome.
wild. Ash, you and I have been playing RPGs quite a bit longer. What's your history here?
So we are fellow old, Steve, my man. You could say that I was primed for Final Fantasy VII, because it was not, in fact, my first RPG. I had gotten into RPGs a few years prior with Final Fantasy VI, then known as 3, of course, in the US. Then I played games like Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana. But, I knew by then that I was, like, ready for the next Final Fantasy. And I very remember quite clearly what the hype cycle felt like for the original release of that game. I remember getting it and playing it for the first time, and I remember how the original Final Fantasy VII really put JRPGs on the map in America in a way that really no other game had done prior. It was a cultural event, really, almost back in the day. And so I was ready for it, and it is a formative game for me that I have played many times over the years. Of course, like we all said, common to all of us who played the original, remake, and now Rebirth. But Final Fantasy VII has been a formative experience for me, and so despite the fact that it wasn't my first RPG necessarily, it is one of the most influential ones in my gaming career for sure, despite the fact that I didn't start with it. And that has held true through today, and I've consumed every possible part of FF7 media over the years. You know, Advent Children, Dirge of Cerberus, Crisis Core, all of it. I'm primed and ready to go see the Advent Children re-release in theaters before Rebirth comes out. Suffice to say, FF7 has had a huge impact on me, and it was incredible playing it back in the day, and I'm so glad that I got to have that experience back at its original release.
Nice. Yeah, my like you said, Ash, I've been playing RPGs for a long time. One of the first games I played was an RPG on the Sega Master System back in the day. I dabbled in Final Fantasy here and there. And being as old as I am, I was around for the hype cycle for FF7, like the original PS1 release. I remember picking up Tobal #1 so that I could play the FF7 demo.
Me too!
Yeah, yep. And so it was really exciting. You know, Final Fantasy VII was kind of the vanguard for what game storytelling would look like, and cinematics and flashy graphics and all the stuff that we kind of, you know, still geek out over today. And I just kind of, I feel that excitement again, you know, with another FF7 game right around the corner. But I'm with you. I've consumed every bit of FF7 media that's been out there. I don't know if I'm going to hit theaters to see Advent Children. I hope so. If it's in my area, I will, but I live in a really small town.
For sure.
But let's talk a little bit about FF7, since all of us on the panel here have played it. I've been trying to replay it on my Switch as we get closer to the release of Rebirth. I'm trying to replay that and remake simultaneously. We'll see how that goes before the end of this month. But I kind of want to rewind, because it's been a few years now. It's hard to believe, but it's been, 3 years since we got a remake, which is shorter than I expected, but still feels really long ago now. And we've, you know, it's been a while, but the Midgar section of Final Fantasy VII, I think, is one of the most effective intros to a world in video game history. Like, it really outlines kind of this, you know, what society is like within the world of Final Fantasy VII. And one thing I love is just kind of I mean, it's not even really a metaphor. It's just literal. You know, you have the people who live on top of the plate and get to see the sky and live a good life. And then you have the majority of people down in the slums, just kind of breathing, you know, recycled air and living this kind of mediocre existence, trying to find their way through. And there's nothing keeping them in Midgar, but it's just kind of like that's where you need to be. Daniel, I want to throw it to you first, because you probably played it, I imagine, more recently than most of us. What is your feeling on that first section of FF7, like when you're in Midgar and kind of learning about Cloud and Barrett and everybody else?
I think, as you said, it was a really good introduction to just how the world is, because I like one of the things that they do with this, especially in Remake and in the original. There's a lot of storytelling that isn't just out in your face. You kind of just observe the environment. You see the people living their lives. Something that really it really struck a chord with me, how they fleshed that out in Remake. But even in 7, you can kind of like imagine these people having their little conversations here and there. You see how they're just trying to survive in Midgar, and you feel what Avalanche is trying to do, because it's a pretty easy concept. Even back then, it was an easy concept for me to understand. Mako is like water, essentially. It's very essential to the planet, but there's only a limited supply of it. And so them trying to overtake or trying to just do something about it, do anything about it to help the world and help other people, you know, help the poor and all of them. I guess it's something that kind of resonated with me. I was really, they're the underdogs. They're definitely there's just a small group against this massive corporation. And the whole section of Midgar really told that story. And as you mentioned, set up exactly what it is that we have to do in this world, at least for that contained area while you're still in Midgar.
Yeah, I think it's a really really powerful intro. It doesn't lean too heavy on drama or anything. It just kind of drops you into day-to-day life. And Derek, I know that was one of the things that you really enthused about. I think you played Remake more than any of us. I think did you platinum it and play it like on every difficulty?
Yes, I platinumed it. I beat it on hard mode. I just did everything because I just loved it that much. And Remake was something special because it took that outline. It's what it felt like an outline in retrospect now when you compare the two of how the day-to-day is. And it even expands upon a lot because, yeah, you got the sense of what the slums were like, how it's not the best. But it didn't click with me at the time when you were in the top and running from the first bombing, what topside was like and how it was essentially different from the slums, because you didn't see houses, you didn't see homes. It just seemed like a commercial district. But with Remake and the visit to Jesse's house that was added into that version, you did get to see what it looked like topside. And lo and behold, it's suburbia, which is kind of amazing in its own way. And it's its own different type of world building there about what it's like for those on topside, but of course you're still getting a ton of what it's like below the plates and what it's essentially like. And just seeing each of those aspects and the conversations between people and how they talked about it all, just the breadth of what was available and just there, it really just does suck you in. So by the time you're assaulting the Shinra building, you're in it. Like, believe it or not, that's only like the third hour of the game, maybe the second hour, depending how fast you're playing, and you're in it. You're like, yes, let's go rescue Aerith. Let's take on Shinra. All this stuff. It feels epic, and you, as a first-time player, you don't realize you're still just in the opening sequence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's true. They did such a good job of taking, in Remake in particular, taking this like short, condensed little sequence and turning it into essentially a full-fledged game. Ash, I want to throw it to you because we haven't heard your thoughts yet, like on FF7, that initial opening bit. Because yeah, I agree, Derek. It's so grand in scope, but it is in the scope of the full work of Final Fantasy VII. It's such a small portion.
Well, and that's so true, and yet, despite the fact that it is such a small portion, it feels so fully formed and realized that by the time you leave Midgar, you almost forget that, oh my god, no, there's still a whole world map out there, because for me, it felt like I had already been on such an epic, rollicking adventure just in those opening hours. And what I love so much about that opening portion with Midgar is that it is so culturally well realized. This feels like a lived-in world with real people. You see the culture. You see the cultural differences between people under the plate and people living above it. You see the socioeconomic differences. You feel that. And that's the fact that they are able to convey that so realistically and thoroughly back in the PS1 days still blows my mind to this day. It is such a fully realized world, even before you get out into the full world. And as you were saying, Derek, Remake just takes that and pushes it even harder with the benefit of modern technology and really fleshes what was already a fully realized world out even more. And I think one of my favorite things about Remake when I played it was that, I think we can all agree that FF7, the original, has a very specific vibe. There's a bit of a weirdness to it in a good way. It has a very specific vibe, and I was so glad that Remake kept that vibe. Like with stuff like Wall Market, things like that, because Wall Market specifically is just such a unique place and area, and the people in it are so unique, and it's just the vibes were kept. And I think that was such an important thing that Remake did so well. And Midgar, it's irreplaceable. It is one of the most influential locations in any game ever, I would say. It's iconic at this point. And in hindsight, I think, devoting the entirety of Remake to fleshing out that specific portion of the game, it works. And I felt it at the time. I still feel that way now. And I feel the same sort of excitement going into Rebirth about, oh yeah, there's a whole world out there, and now I get to go to explore it. Yeah, I had my fun over here in Midgar, and that was awesome. But oh my god, there's so much more. And I kind of feel the modern version of that same excitement that I did back in the original when I left Midgar and saw the world map for the first time.
Well, you know what works so well about that to make Remake its own game where it just focuses on Midgar is that every set piece of Midgar is so memorable. The first bombing mission, the second bombing mission, the introduction of Tifa, meeting Aerith, the Salt Orange Shinra, Wall Market, as you said. Every single moment just feels like this massive event that you cannot forget. And of course, the rest of the game has a ton of those moments as well, but it's so condensed within Midgar that it makes sense, as you said, in hindsight, to make that such a focus. And the fact that, you can get through a remake in about 35 to 40 hours, and that's pretty sizable. But then you hear about how big Rebirth is and what they've been saying about it, how, 100 hours if you're doing everything. It's like, I was just, I went out of my way to do everything, like, even on hard mode the original time. So I'm looking at like a 200-hour game if I do what I did in the original remake. So yeah, it's massive. It shows you how big this world is.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me where we're at with this now. Because, in traditional Final Fantasy VII, obviously you get out of Midgar and it opens the whole world up to you. And at the end of Remake, that's essentially where we're placed, right? Rebirth puts you right at the beginning of that, where you get to explore the wide open world. But before we go too far into what we hope to see and what we expect to see from Rebirth, and of course our hands-on experience with the demo, I want to talk a little bit about how Final Fantasy VII Remake plays with the narrative of the original, which could be like an hour-long discussion unto itself. But for the sake of brevity, we'll keep it condensed here. And I think what I find most interesting, and I've said this before, is that we have no clue where Rebirth is going to take us, because Remake kind of swerves, especially towards the end. Initially it's like little things that are different here and there. And of course, as Derek alluded to, there's additional content that just wasn't present in FF7 that, in my view, fits really well into the existing Final Fantasy VII story beats. But there's also completely wild and new stuff that just kind of, we go from what is a pretty tame exit of Midgar to a wild set piece at the end of Remake. But Daniel, we haven't heard from you in a bit. What was your take on the changes that Remake introduced into the FF7 storyline?
I love how we went into Final Fantasy VII Remake and we took Remake so literally that this is the original, but it's remade as a whole new experience, a whole new fleshed out world. A place like Seventh Heaven in the slums is so much more realized with the people living in it, and you see everything that's just living there, and you realize what you're fighting for, and you're just like, yeah, this is like how I imagined it as I was a kid, but it's completely realized. And you're playing through the story, and if you're a fan of the original, the more you play of the story, the more you think that I don't know if they really meant remake in the way that we meant that they literally meant remake. Because, as you mentioned, there are bits and pieces of the story that they deviate from the original, and you kind of get the feeling that some characters are aware that it's deviating, and so you could be somebody that is just jumping into Final Fantasy VII for the first time with Remake, or you could be one of the original OGs like us, and we both have different perspectives of how these characters are understanding and analyzing the world. And I think that's fascinating that anybody can jump into this and they'll get different perspectives of how exactly the story is being told. Because as you mentioned, going on later into the story, things get a little crazy, and by this point we don't know what we're getting into with Rebirth, and that's exciting.
I agree, and while I think there is definitely value to be had in a one-to-one remake, that also would have been exciting if that's the direction they decided to take it instead. But I think what they are doing, which is a by and large remake, but then subtly circumventing our expectation for those who play the original, and subtly introducing certain differences such that we don't really know where things are going, is even more exciting, honestly. Like, I would have been so happy with a one-to-one remake, but we really don't know where this is going now. But at the same time, if you never played the original and you're just now getting into the world of Final Fantasy VII for the first time with the remake project, those differences don't necessarily I mean, yeah, if you want the context for them, the original is there, but you're still inhabiting this amazing world with these wonderful characters. I mean, the cast of characters in this game is one of the most beloved for a reason, with characters like Cloud, Tifa, Aerith, Barret, Cid, everybody, Red, all of them. And there's still those awesome characters that existed in the original, but now they're fleshed out even more. And so even if you never played the original, you can still have an amazing time really digging into this world and getting to know this ragtag band of characters that, go try to save the world together. And it still can be, at least in my mind, a really satisfying journey in spite of not having played the original. Of course, I'm assuming that because I did play the original, but these are still, the characters are so well realized in Remake.
Well, I can guarantee you that's the case, Ash, at least in certain people's case. But our oldest son became interested in Final Fantasy VII because of Sephiroth being in Smash Brothers. He played Smash Brothers,
right,
and he realized I had Final Fantasy VII Remake, so we asked to borrow it, and he played it through to completion and really enjoyed it. Don't know what he thought about all the crazier aspects by the end, but he had a really good time, to the point that even though he doesn't know exactly when he'll get the chance to play Rebirth, because we only have one PS5 and it's kind of belongs to me, he actually has already replayed Remake and is just beaten it already. He's just that excited for it. He really enjoyed that game, despite still not playing the original Final Fantasy VII. It's just what he's in for. And I think what's so clever about this, especially if you ever go back and rewatch the very first trailer for Remake, when they revealed that they are actually doing this, there's a narration as Cloud is walking through the crowd, and the narration is basically saying it might bring joy, it might bring sorrow, all these different ways people could react to it, but it is coming. And you realize, they knew how people were going to react to these changes and were ready for it. But that makes it all the more exciting that this was planned from the beginning. This was how it was always going to be. And I am so fascinated by how Rebirth is going to continue these threads that were established in Remake, because I distinctly remember seeing that and being like, okay, I'm in, but it's highly dependent on how Rebirth handles them. And so far, I'm in. Show me. And I really got to see how this does, because let's be honest, the middle chapter is definitely the hardest. And if they pull this off, I think I can go into the third and final piece of this remake completely confident. I mean, I'm already pretty confident, but complete confidence.
Yeah.
Right.
You mentioned Sephiroth, and that's a major point to be made here, is that in the Marigar section, we don't really ever, in the original, you don't ever really even see Sephiroth yet. He's not even introduced. But you need to have this guy here for the first part of Remake. And the way they introduced him, the way they integrated him into part one for Remake, I thought it was a wonderful way to include him, but not also be like, they're rushing the narrative. Or like, no, they're doing it in a certain way where he doesn't feel like he's rushed into the story, but he's also definitely integrated, and people know that, he and Cloud have a history together in some way or form.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing that they've done. Like, putting Sephiroth in essentially the first third of Final Fantasy VII is a really interesting thing, because in the original, our first interaction with Sephiroth is in the form of a flashback, right? Which of course leads us into the Rebirth demo. If you've played it, it covers the flashback. And I found it, this is where, for me, Rebirth gets to be really interesting. Like Derek said, this middle bit to me is the hardest one to do, because one, with Remake, they already established that the narrative is just going to go off the rails if you're an FF7 OG like all of us. So we already are going into Rebirth just with no idea what to expect. And then, the fact that they've already shown us Sephiroth, and we've had to deal with him once already. And now we kind of, they introduce additional characters that if again, you played the original FF7, you're like, they shouldn't be here. What are they going to do? And I don't want to go too far into the weeds in case you haven't played FF7. I don't want to spoil it for you, but if you know, and it's one of those scenarios where my mind is just kind of boggling at the possibilities of what we could experience with this game. And of course, having played the demo, I'm just like Derek. I'm all in. I'm ready. Just get me the full game. Let me play the whole thing.
Need it.
I need to know what happens. And that's something that I love so much about this, is that even if you know FF7, you don't know this version of it. This is a whole new story at this point. And that to me is as exciting as when I picked up the original, from Sears back in the 90s. I'm just really excited to get my hands on this and find out what new story they're going to tell.
Well, that's the interesting thing, is it is a whole new story, but it also isn't, because we've already seen from trailers that there's a lot of those big moments, those memorable moments, I should say, from the original that are still there. We still get that recontextualization, that remake version of those, but with a twist. And that's the fun part. We don't know where those twists are going to pop up.
Yeah. And that's so true. And that, I think, makes it more exciting, is you don't know when those twists are going to pop up. And especially given, again, I'm not going to get too much into the weeds here, like you were saying, Steve, because we want to keep this spoiler free, but especially given certain things that happened that really deviated toward the end of Remake, we don't know where that stuff is going to pop up again in Rebirth. And it could be right around the corner, and we don't know. And that's, even if the big picture stuff is all the same, it's those little deviations that we don't know when they're going to hit us or from what direction. And that's what makes this so exciting going into.
I agree. We're in kind of uncharted territory here. I agree with Derek too about, like, you see those familiar story beats in trailers, and it's like you think but they've done just enough to where you're like, where's the swerve? What's going to happen? Like, there's a scene that I really need to know what happens in it during, in this retelling of FF7.
Oh, yeah.
My heart gets tight just thinking about how Square could mess with our heads about that. But we could speculate again. We could do an hour of speculation on this and not even scratch the surface of what we expect to see. But we've all played, like most people that are watching this, I assume, we've all played a small portion of the game at this point, thanks to the publicly available demo for Rebirth. And one thing that I want to point out that I think more and more games are doing that I'm really happy about with Rebirth is that they are lowering the barrier of entry to sequels by giving you a story recap at the start, right? So even in the demo, if you download the free demo on PSN, it'll tell you what happened in FF7 Remake if you don't want to pick up and play through that game, or if you're in my shoes, if you don't want to replay the game to refamiliarize yourself. You could just kind of experience like a Reader's Digest version of the story to get you up to speed on what's going on here, and then jump right in. Which I think is a really smart thing for Square to do, because this is the first PS5 exclusive entry in this trilogy of games. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good time to hop in if you haven't yet. But they're also selling like a twin pack for the game, which if you want to buy both games all in one,
smart.
There's that. Yeah, which is pretty smart. Yeah, if you picked up a PS5 last Christmas, I can tell you one of the first things I'd buy would be the twin pack of these games.
I mean, I recently played the Yuffie section, and we're not going to do too much into that, but the Yuffie section's really good. Nice little prologue, honestly, for Rebirth.
Yeah, the interlude is really something special.
So let's talk about our impressions with the demo. And Derek, you streamed it for us, so I want you to go first.
Pure joy. That's all that was for me. Just seeing every little moment, because it's not the entirety, but most of the Midgar flashback. So there's a lot of memorable moments from that I was like, are they going to keep this part? Are they going to keep this? What are they going to do here? And those moments are there. And in case you haven't played it or want to experience it for yourself and haven't had a chance to play the demo or what have you, the things you think are going to be there are mostly there. You'll find it, but also expansions like Cloud actually getting properly introduced to Tifa's teacher Zelngon, having little dialogue referencing moments from Cloud and Tifa's childhood. From other characters, that there's just great little moments like that, and a true understanding of what what you need to really focus on for this flashback. And I think it accomplishes all that. But combat-wise, oh my god, just the way the moveset has expanded, the new perfect guards that you can do, like it really does feel like they took the criticisms of the first game's combat system, like for example the weak aerial combat, and greatly expanded upon that. They're introducing a ton of new materia already, so you get a taste of what's coming there, and it just seems like a fantastic expansion on an already great system that I highly enjoyed. And it was like, even though it was kind of new, it fit like a glove, and I was right back into how I was playing before, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm ready for this. I'm like, the bosses that you fight, the moments you experience, it's really great stuff. I highly enjoyed it.
I'm particularly into the presentation of it all. I think the presentation is off the charts, and that's probably not actually surprising, but it still is worth mentioning. I think, like you were talking about some of those smaller moments, Derek, and especially when I think back to the original, things like, it's poking around Tifa's room and seeing how they handled the dialogue for that part, and Cloud visiting his mom's house, that part, but then the things that subvert your expectations, like the piano. They turned the piano into a whole freaking rhythm game, and I'm like, yes,
no fully featured piano.
Make it so that you have an entire board of piano keys available with 2 sticks and a few buttons. Like, how did they do that?
It's so cool. And then what really got me though was right at the beginning of the demo, when you're starting or close to the beginning, when you're starting the hike up Mount Nebel, and just the music comes in and the credits start rolling, the intro credits, and you just, that feeling washes over you that you're really about to experience something special. And of course, music is such a big part of Final Fantasy VII's identity as well, and Remake soundtrack was incredible, and I have every reason to believe that Rebirth soundtrack is going to hit on that same amazing level over and over again. I mean, they just said during the State of Play over 400 new tracks were created for this game, and already what we got a hint of in the demo, I'm so ready. I'm so ready to be pulled into this world again.
We got a countrified version of Tifa's theme. I love it.
I know.
How is there 400 tracks in this game? Do they only play once throughout the entire thing? You never hear a song repeat throughout the entire game? Like, 400 is an incredible amount.
I can't even.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, just that entire intro, it's so fantastic. Like, you see Nibelheim, and you get the introduction to how they're introducing you early on with, like, they're exploring that one area. It's going to be much more wide and open world like, because you can feel that as running around. Now Cloud's movements are more contextual to the world. You can move around a bit more, you can hop up ledges and such, you can jump up on things, and you can see how this is going to play into the entire way the format of the game is going to be, exploring worlds like this. And gosh, it's again the same thing that happened with the remake. You see Nibelheim, and it's like so much more lived in. You see people everywhere, just chatting, talking, fanboying or fangirling about Sephiroth in town. I loved how, whenever you're talking to somebody, or when you're passing by, you hear conversations off the side, and you see in the corner of the screen, they're just kind of chatting, and then you get near where Sephiroth is visiting the mayor, and like 10 layers of text come by, and it's like, oh, it's Sephiroth! I want to chat with Sephiroth! I want to see you. You really get a feeling of how popular and how well revered Sephiroth is here, and he's a pretty cool guy, all things considered, for most of this demo.
Yeah, I found it was really interesting that in the demo, one thing that I loved is that during the flashback, they actually had party members cut in and ask Cloud questions. And as Ash alluded to, like, as you do certain things, Tifa in particular will react to your behavior, which I thought was really funny. One of the things that I really, really liked about the demo, aside from just the fact that, I mean, we got to say it's a demo, it's free, it's out there, but if you don't want to know, just plug your ears. You can play as friggin' Sephiroth in the demo. Which,
yeah.
I thought was amazing.
The first action you can do in the demo is you slash up a monster as Sephiroth. I'm just like, what? This is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? But
what an effective way of just showing his power.
Yeah.
Really
a really effective way, right? By giving you direct control of him. But one of the things that I really love that they do in that demo is that as Cloud is telling this story, and of course it's a protracted story because it's a playable segment, is that occasionally they'll cut back to all of them in calm, and they'll be like, the way you're describing Sephiroth sounds kind of like a nice guy.
Yeah.
And, yeah, which is like a real, when you think about it, that if somebody was telling a story that long, you would probably eventually cut in and be like, where's the part where he's not good? Because you make him sound awesome. Yeah, I just really like how they characterize these conversations, and they make them, they remind you that you're playing a flashback, that you're being told a story from Cloud's point of view. And of course, again, there's a lot of stuff sprinkled into that bit of the flashback for those of us that played the old games. Parts that make me kind of, wrinkle an eyebrow and be like, this seems like a reference to another piece of Final Fantasy media I've played. This seems like something that connects to a part of the story that I experienced in the original game. Am I really seeing what I think I'm seeing? Is Square playing with me? What's going on here? There are a few points where I'm like, oh, this is definitely a plot point from the original game, and I know it having the benefit of having played that game.
Yeah.
Well, the other great thing is
exactly
that
what you're talking about.
Yeah, and the other great thing is there's lines directly pulled from the original game.
Yep.
Like word for word, and it's
like that's like when Cloud visited his mom's house, for example.
Yeah.
I was like, oh. And my wife was watching me play the demo, and of course she hasn't played the original, and she was happy to see me so happy, and I'm like, this is word for word from the original. She's like, I love this for you, and I know that it would hit, like if I had played it, but I can see the look on your face, and I can see that this is landing for you so much. And on that note, by the way, even though she hasn't played the original FF7, she was super into the demo and like, oh my god, where's this all going to go? And just knows from osmosis through me, like, she knows immediately Cloud, Sephiroth. When you hear One Winged Angel, she's like, oh, Sephiroth. There's so much, there's so many iconic things in the cast and characters in World of 7 that even a newcomer like her, she's like, oh, Sephiroth, okay, here we go. Where are they going to take this?
I was going to say, and that's one of the things that I find really interesting. It's as somebody who's loved Final Fantasy for longer than our average viewer has been alive. I think that it's really interesting to me to see the response from people who aren't big Final Fantasy fans, who are picking this up for the first time, who are getting into the series, or who are discovering it through these games. I think that there's a potential for like a whole new group of people to really pick up and become Final Fantasy fans the same way a lot of us did through 7. Like I've played RPGs my whole life, but I would credit 7 as being one of 2 games, the other being Chrono Trigger, that made me really like keep my eyes on the genre. And I kind of think that could be happening here for people with these re-releases, or rather not re-releases, these full-on remakes of Final Fantasy 7.
Yeah, it could usher in a whole new generation of Final Fantasy fans. And I hope it does. Or I hope they do, I should say.
Yeah, so, I mean, to wrap this up, I just kind of want to go around and talk about what our kind of expectations are, or what we think, how this is going to land for us. Obviously, none of us have played more than the demo that's available. We're going to play the game when it comes out at the end of February, like everybody else. But I would say, for me personally, after having played the demo, I am more hyped than I was, which I don't know how I could be surprised, because Remake was such a stellar game for me that I couldn't imagine Rebirth being anything but here I am, having played just, an hour or so of Rebirth, and I am just dying to get my hands on this game. This is going to be a game I'm talking about at the end of the year. I'm certain of it. But what about you guys? We'll start with you, Derek.
I mean, I've been excited for this. This isn't in my Game of the Year category. By the end of the year, I'll be shocked. And the thing is, just even from the little bit I've seen, I think no matter what, the journey itself the adventure itself is going to be a fantastic time. They've added so many touches into this from a gameplay perspective, from a story perspective, that is just, draws me in. The fact that we're already seeing monsters from the original game show up in Rebirth. Like, yes, I love that they do that they bring back those original monsters as well. It's not just some random new monsters they came up with. The boss of the demo is freaking amazing, and I'm so glad it's there. It's just that kind of excitement to it, to the point where, again, I don't know if they'll stick the landing. I have confidence that they will, but even if they don't, or it doesn't quite hit perfectly for me, I think the journey itself will be enough to really carry this game.
How about you, Ed? Or Daniel?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I've been very interested to see like where this is going to go, but there's so much about it that I just want to be there and experience the world myself. There's so much world to explore. I think the exploration is going to be something that I'm going to be hooked on for a very long time. I want to like see parts of the world map and just fill that map out, and hopefully I can do so at a reasonable amount of time, so I can just explore all these locations like Costa del Sol. Characters have different, as we saw in the most recent state of play, the characters had different outfits. Sailor Barrett, I'm really hyped for. And gold, I want to go to Gold Saucer. I want to see all the old games how they implement it now, and all the new games that they implement. It looks so exciting, and the way that they really just hype up that location. I wonder if it's going to be like the new Wall Market, where if we're going to see everything just kind of fleshed out in a very extravagant way. That's something I'm just dying to see as well. But gosh, all the things that you see from the original that you're seeing here now in Remake and in Rebirth as well. Like, I just want to see all that fleshed out, and it's just an exciting time to be a fan of Final Fantasy VII. Even if you're not a fan of it, it's an exciting time to become one.
Definitely. I think, obviously, my hype for this is over the moon. Y'all know that. That's not a surprise. My hype is just at maximum level. But given how much I loved Remake, I feel very confident going into Rebirth that I'm going to have a great time. But I'm also feeling a little bit of fear, and in a good way. I don't mean that as a bad thing. I'm on two fronts. On one hand, the fact that they've been able, seemingly, to recreate the wider world of Final Fantasy VII to such an epic scale, and it means I know that I'm going to be playing this game for a long time, and it's a little scary knowing the overwhelming amount of content I'm going to be getting into. I'm going to want to explore every corner of this reimagined world, version of FF7's world. I'm going to want to check out every Gold Saucer minigame. I'm going to want to check out every nook and cranny. And then there's the other part where, Remake's reintroduction of these characters and the way these characters have been fleshed out in ways they couldn't on PS1 makes me fearful of what could happen to them. And I know we all know what I'm talking about, and I'm not going to, dig into that too much, but I love these characters so much, and I love them even more than I did in their, OG incarnations. And I want to see good things happen to them. I want them all to make it out okay. And, there are reasons to be fearful on front, but that's a good thing. That means I'm invested. My heart is so fully into this, and, we haven't played the full game yet. We can't deliver a verdict, of course, until we do, but I have very high expectations and a lot of hype going into this, based just on how much I loved what they did with the remake.
Yeah, I think that wraps it up really nicely. I'm super excited. I know we all are. Can it be February 29th now?
I wish.
I need to
Can we
play
leap
this
to
game,
leap
but,
day? Yeah.
Yeah, but thank you so much to Square Enix for sponsoring this video. Again, if you want to pick up your own copy of FF7 Rebirth, you can do so at the link down in our description. That's going to do it for us. Thanks for letting us gush over Final Fantasy VII Rebirth for the last half hour or so. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, you know what to do. Please consider subscribing if you'd like to find more content like this and more content about Rebirth once it's out from us here at GVG. And we'll see you all next time. Until then.
Till we meet again.
Bye.
Let's mosey.